Ann here. I am going to show you guys for March Murrini Madness month how to make a koi fish pond bead. So what you'll need is a base color, whatever color you want your water to be. I'm personally using a color called Earth because it has some blue and green striations that I really like. You'll need some clear because you're going to be doing some encasing for this bead. This is Double Helix Zephyr clear. It's my absolute favorite clear, and it's the only clear that I use because I find it's the clearest clear. That's what I encase all of my murrini in when I make them as well. And you'll need some murrini, some sort of fish. I have, or actually any murrini that you want to make into a bead. It doesn't have to be fish. I'm just showing you a koi fish pond. So I have couple different kind of koi fish, one with orange, black, and white, and one with just orange and white. I also have some lily pads, which I'm going to leave slightly raised on the top of my bead. And then maybe I'll put in some of the little green turtle murrini that I have in here as well. The other things you'll need are a pair of pliers. Pliers. I have tungsten tweezers, that's what I meant, not pliers, tweezers. I have some tungsten tip tweezers that I've gotten used to using, so I like those. I've got a brass marver that I'm going to use to pat down my murrini, and then I have a graphite marver as well. And then I have a shaping tool. You can use whatever shaping tool you like. I'm not going to make a huge bead for this. It's going to be a focal bead. But I've done these in small little 15mm round beads as well, that I really liked how those turned out. So what I'm going to do is tell you first off, if you are using murrini, you have to preheat them. You can preheat them however you want. I suggest using a hot plate of some sort. That you can keep right next to your workstation. If you happen to have your kiln right next to your workstation, you can put your murrini on top of your kiln. That will heat it up as well. It doesn't need to be super duper hot. I use a little cup warmer that I bought at Michael's for like $5 or something. So that is, it really does cause your murrini to pop and crack much less if you have something to keep them warm before you start using them. So I'm going to make a base bead. This is, anybody who's been doing this long enough to want to learn how to do murrini, you should have base beads down. So I'm just heating up my mandrel so that it is hot enough to accept my glass. Again, I don't want to make a super huge bead. It's I'm going to put a couple of fish on either side. I don't have very big fish for this one. This is just, they're decent sized. You'll be able to definitely tell that they're koi fish when you're done with this. I have been making murrini now for about 3 years, but before I started making murrini in glass, I should say I've been making murrini in glass for 3 years. Before that, I made, murrini in polymer clay. So I have been doing that since I was 18 years old. So I kind of got the concept long before I ever started working with glass. I've been working in glass now for about 6 years. The last 3 being murrini, more specialized in the murrini because I love murrini. I think those little chips of glass can add so much detail to a bead that you just can't get any other way. My most recent murrinis that I've been making have been, I made a lobster the other day. So anybody who's doing a aquarium bead, I've got some lobsters for you on my Etsy site. And I also did a seahorse recently. I have done these, like I say, the koi pond one, so I've got a couple different koi fish and some lily pads to go in that set. Alright, so now I have my base bead. It's not too wonky. It's got a decent shape. And I'm going to use my parallel mashers to mash this thin, because I don't want it to be super big. I'm going to make it flat in the center here. So I heated it up nice, and I'm squishing it as hard as I can, because at this point it doesn't matter that it's thin. You know, you never want to leave less than a mandrel's width between the hole and the top of your bead. But since I'm going to be encasing this in clear, I will have plenty more glass on there. This is going to be my core. So this is my pretty earth, and it's green and blue, so that's why I kind of like this one. It's really neat the way it does. I'm getting rid of the chill marks that I just put in there with my masher on both sides. I just want to make sure that it's out of there, because I don't want to add any more potential of getting the bubbles in there. So now with my tweezers, I'm going to pick up one of my murrini. I'm going to gently warm it in my flame. It's warm enough that it should not pop, and it should be safe. Okay, so I've got that ready. I'm heating the spot on my bead where I want to put my murrini. So it's going to be molten. My murrini is going to be warm, and I'm going to attach the two and kind of push my murrini in there a little bit. Now I've got my clear ready. I'm going to heat up enough of this clear to cover the entirety of my murrini on the top. Okay, so you want to, if you've got a big murrini, you want a decent sized glob of clear glass. If you've got a small one, you don't need so much. This is a long murrini, being that it's kind of in a fish shape here. So I'm going to swipe on this glob of clear on the top of this murrini from one end down to the other. Like I say, you don't want your murrini to be hot, because then the murrini will distort. You want it to be warm so that it's staying attached to your bead, but you don't want it to be hot. You want that clear to be on that you're going to put on the top. You want that to be molten. And then you're going to gently just press that clear so that it covers the entire face of your murrini. Okay, so you can see my murrini is still raised. I've kind of wonked out my shape of my bead on the other side, so I'm just going to flatten that back up, because I'm going to put now a murrini on this side. And I'm going to make this a double-sided bead. That way, if it flips over, you'll still see, you know, you'll get a koi pond on that side too. Okay, now I've got another one of my fish, and I'm going to choose where I want to put it on this side of the bead. So I'm heating my bead, I'm warming my murrini, I'm heating my bead, and I'm going to place the two together and kind of smush it in a little. The murrini is going to stay raised. It will look like a 3D fish in your bead. Okay, so you don't want to smush it in there so hard that it goes to the other side. So you can kind of see it's raised there. Now I'm just going to heat up my clear just like I did to the other fish on the other side, warming up that murrini and heating to molten this clear, and then swiping it across the top of my fish. If it were a round murrini, that's actually easier, because you just put the glob on and then it's round already, and you don't have to swipe it at all. But since these are long fish and not particularly round, I do it a little swipe. Okay, so now I've got a fish on one side, I've got a fish on the other side. I'm going to add another fish to both sides, doing the same process. I'm going to pick a spot where I want this fish to go. I'm going to heat up my murrini a little bit. I'm going to heat up my spot where I'm going to put my murrini a lot, and I'm going to join the two together. Just press it in. This murrini happens to be a little more round because the tail is kind of swooping like it's swimming. I'm going to heat up my clear, big enough glob so that it covers the face of the murrini, and then drop it on there. Again, since that was clear, I just had to, round, I just dropped that on there. So now, heating up mostly just the clear. I heat that up. What this clear dollop over top is doing is simply making it so that if I put heat there, the heat is not going to distort the murrini. It might distort that clear that I just put on there, but it's not going to distort the murrini that I put under that clear. Now I'm going to put another fish on my other side, excuse me, and I'm heating up where I'm going to put that. I'm heating up my murrini so that it's warm enough to stay, and I push down a little bit. Again, this is kind of a little bit more round on this murrini, not as long, so I'm gonna just heat up a glob of clear, heat up my murrini where I want just a little bit of heat in there, and then plop the clear on there. If your murrini looks like it's glowing under there, it's too hot. Don't do the press down until the murrini has cooled it down a little bit. So take it out of the heat and let it get some time to cool down, and then reheat that clear that's on top and press it down. Okay, this is a totally different technique than what you'll be learning when you want to do 3D flowers. Okay, that's a different way to add your murrini. But this is the perfect way to do it when you're doing aquarium beads, or you want a scene with a bunch of different murrini on there that you don't want to distort. Okay, so I've got a couple of fish on both sides, and I'm happy with just 2 on either side. Now I'm going to find the spot where it's most likely to get bubbles. The spot where it's most likely to get bubbles is in between the 2 fish. Okay, so I'm going to heat up a glob of clear, and I'm going to pinpoint that spot with some heat so that it'll accept my clear, and I'm gonna smush my clear in there. If you have a nice glob of molten clear, then it will smush right in there and not leave any bubbles. So now I'm gonna come to the other side of that spot, heat it just a little bit, heat my molten clear, and squish it in there. I'm going to come over to the other side of this bead and do the same thing between these 2 fish that I have. Got that spot, I want it a little bit warm, and I want my molten clear to squish down in there. I'm going to come to the other side, heat it a little bit. Don't want to heat my murrini too much because I don't want them to move. I just want them to accept this clear. Yeah, squish that in there. Okay, now I'm going to go around each of my fish murrini with this molten clear that I'm making, and I'm going to push it up into that crevice between that clear top and the base bead, without getting my murrini too hot. Again, the cooler you can keep your murrini, the better, because then you're not going to distort it. This one has a stress right there, so I'm gonna heat that off. Get rid of that. Okay, now I'm gonna continue. I've encased one of my fish completely on that side, so now I'm gonna come over to this other side. Again, if you just switch from side to side, it allows your murrini some time to cool down on the other side, so that you're not potentially going to get it too hot and distort it. Okay, now back to the other side. Smushing this glass in. This is the smushing encasement way. There are as many ways to encase as there are people who encase things, so I'm not telling you this is the only way. I'm not telling you this is the right way. This is the right way for me, as I have tried many different techniques. But you may want to try other techniques if this is not the right way for you, to find which way works best for you. Okay. So if you're getting distortion when you're doing this smush in, it is because your murrini is too hot. Okay, so you want to work your base bead and your murrini pretty darn cool for this bead. You're going to go back in there and give it a lot more heat after you've encased the whole thing. But for right now, the base is very cool, and the hot stuff is going to be that molten clear that you're putting on top of everything. So right now I'm just filling in any spots that were not previously encased with that clear. I'm going around both sides because I know for sure I did not put clear on those. I was just worrying about encasing my fish. You want to have a decent amount of clear hanging out with you, so these beads can get pretty big. That's why I smush it so thinly when I'm first starting with my core, my base. Because once you start adding murrini and then covering them with clear and that, it can get like a decent sized bead. Okay, now I think I have encased the entirety of my bead, so you can see all my lumps. Now I'm going to shape it and get rid of those lumps. That's where this little tool comes in. It's another Karina tool. I don't remember, Monster Shaper or something like that. So what I'm going to do is heat this clear. I want mostly the clear on just the top. I don't want my murrini to be glowing too much. I want it more just on the top of the clear to move. Again, if you get your murrini molten, they're more likely to move and distort. So just keeping that in mind. They can glow a little bit, but you don't want them to be screaming hot. Okay, so I did this one side with my shaper here. Now I'm going to move on to the other side, and just want to make sure that there aren't any divots where I need to add more clear glass before I finish up my shaping. It's easier to add a little bit of glass if there's a divot. But you can also sometimes move if you've got another spot where you can see that there's a lot of extra glass and it's close by. You can move it a little bit to get that divot filled in. Now we're working on the shape here. You want your ends to look at least a little pretty. They might not have the puckers that you like, but they should not be sharp edges or lumpy edges. And that's why I like this tool, is so you can kind of get in there. So my bead has its general shape. I think. Now I'm going to look at my murrini a little closer, and I'm going to look to see if there seem to be any areas that have bubbles. This has a bubble right here that I'm concerned about because it is not round. It is kind of an oblong bubble. Bubbles are not the end of the world. However, when you have a bubble, you want to make it round. When you're putting murrini on, I can assure you I have made hundreds, if not thousands at this point in my murrini career, of beads with murrini on them. And you will almost always get some bubble. Again, you can get rid of the bubble to the extent that you can by making it round. Less dangerous for your bead by making that bubble round. Alright, so got that bubble out. Now I'm just going to look on the other side here. I don't see any that are screaming bubble to me. So this side is good. I'm going to use my magic wand marver here just to kind of get my clear a little bit more placed where I want it to be around this top edge of my bead. There we go. That's just a little wonky looking. Now I have used this tool and I have caused some of the chill marks to appear, so I'm going to try and work those out. When I put on this big fish here, it kind of got a little sideways, so I'm going to strategically place a lily pad to cover what I don't like about my bead. That is the other joy of murrini. That if there's a spot on your bead you don't like, you can cover it up. So I'm going to put a murrini. This is going to be topical. So I heated up the top spot where I wanted this little lily pad to live. And now I'm going to heat the top of my lily pad and I'm going to squish it a little bit. I'm not going to encase my lily pad. It does not have any clear around it. This particular one that I made, it's just green. So smushing it a little bit is not going to distort my lily pad at all. Okay, because it's just the way this particular murrini was made. Was made to go on top. Okay, so now I want to round it out a little bit. I'm leaving it raised a little bit because it's on top of the water. And I like that look. So now there are some chill marks in it, so I'm going to melt those out, and I'm going to go to the other side with the murrini, with a lily pad. And I don't have any spots on this side that I don't like, so I'm just going to kind of pick a spot that doesn't cover up any of my fish. I'm going to heat that spot up nice and good, and I'm going to put my murrini lily pad on top there. Let's push it in a little bit. A little insurance heat in the ends of this bead because it is kind of decent sized bead. Heat up my lily pad and kind of gently press it down. You want to press it down enough so that it becomes incorporated with the bead, but not so much that it goes all the way into my clear, or at least that's my plan. Yours might be different. So then I've got another lily pad. I'm going to put a second lily pad over here on this other side. I'm going to make kind of a little, maybe even a trio of lily pads over here. Okay, I heated up that spot, put my lily pad down, pressing it down. I didn't make the lily pads very complex because I wanted to be able to leave them a little raised, and the more complex, when you squish them down, the more possibility you're going to lose some of the definition. And lily pads are really not that complex anyway. So I've got a couple of lily pads on this side. I've got one big one over here. And lily pads don't usually live alone, so I'm going to add another one over here. At least in all of the pond ones that I looked at. They're usually a couple lily pads together. Okay. So here we go. And I'm going to put a third one over on this other side, just to, because I think that would look cool. This one will be kind of between these other two. So I've got one little fishy here that's poking out from underneath the lily pads. And I have covered the spot that I didn't like about him, which was his tail kind of went sideways. So, again, this is going to be a beautiful bead now, and nobody's going to even know that his tail went sideways because I've kind of covered up where that went awry. So, let me heat my ends. I'm going to heat out any chill marks that I might have left there on my lily pads. And there she is. I will post her in the comments along with the other ones that I've been making to try and get you guys the best tutorial on this. So she'll go in the kiln overnight and be ready to be shown off tomorrow.